My name is Kinsley. I am 32 years old and I live in New York, working as a financial analyst for a tech company. For many years, I carried my family on my shoulders, from my younger brother's college tuition to my mother's medical bills and my father's credit card debt. I never demanded anything in return. But on that Christmas night, in the very house I had always thought of as a safe place, I was cut off from my family in a cold, irrevocable way. The room was full of warm lights and the faint smell of cinnamon, and the clink of glasses rang out like the chorus of a perfect celebration. I stood by the banquet table, laughing with a few cousins, when my father stepped up to the podium holding a microphone. He did not offer a toast. He stared straight at me and enunciated each word. "Kinsley is no longer our daughter. From now on, you must fend for yourself. Don't come back to this house." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me as if I had committed some terrible crime. I froze, not out of anger, but because my heart had been wrenched out of what I had always believed was family. Have you ever been rejected by your own relatives in front of the whole family? If you have felt that, please leave a comment below. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because this story does not end there. That night was only the beginning of everything I was about to uncover. When I walked out of that bright house on Christmas night, my hands still numb because I hadn't had time to put on a coat, I did not cry. I did not scream or argue. I simply walked slowly through the thin flakes of falling snow, as if a veil were being drawn over everything that had just happened inside. I am not a perfect child, but I have tried to live decently. Over the years, I paid off the credit card debt my father quietly accumulated in the 3 years after his construction company failed. My mother, though she never said it out loud, knew full well. She would avoid meeting my eyes whenever I emailed her a doctor's bill. And Noah, my brother, only 19 years old, spent nearly $20,000 in 1 year on student loans and credit that I had helped him register for to build credit history. I had noticed the imbalance for a long time. But what unsettled me was not the numbers themselves. It was being treated like a walking ATM. No one asked if I was okay when I worked 16-hour days during the year-end crunch. No one remembered my birthday last year when I sat alone in my rented apartment in Queens with a cold takeout meal and a single message from my bank assistant. I used to believe that sacrifice was natural in a family, that when someone struggles, others should step up. I did not keep track. I never once mentioned how much I had paid. I just sent the money quietly. Because I wanted to keep a home for Noah, stability for my mother, and a shred of dignity for my father. Yet apparently my silence made them think I had no limits. 3 months before that Christmas night, I was promoted at work from senior analyst to head of financial strategy. I did not tell anyone in the family. I simply sent home a new television because my mother said the old one had a streak across the screen. A week later, my father called. Not to say thank you, but to ask if I could float $3,000 for a rental property project with an old acquaintance in New Jersey. "You're the only one in this house with a steady income. If you don't help, who will?" he said over the phone, his tone flat, without a hint of hesitation. I did not refuse, but I began to record every money move out of my account. Not to settle accounts, but to stay alert. What I did not expect was that alertness would turn to shock when I discovered Noah had used the credit card I opened for him to put a deposit on a used sports car, then sold it to friends a few weeks later without returning a cent. I called him directly. The first thing I asked was, "Noah, what were you thinking, using my name to take out a loan and then sell the car like that?" He gave a faint laugh over the phone. "You have money. How much you make, I don't know. It's not a big deal." I was silent for 10 seconds, 10 seconds that felt like a year. Then I hung up. And I understood in my brother's eyes I was no longer his sister but an unlimited sponsor. I hadn't told my parents about this when the Christmas party arrived. The house I grew up in, once small and cozy, had been decked out like a hotel ballroom. A towering Christmas tree stood in the corner with presents I had never seen and bills I had paid. When I asked my mother, she only smiled. "Your father said this is a special Christmas. We have to do it right." No one asked what I had contributed. I did not ask either. I brought 2 bottles of red wine and a homemade dessert. I walked into the living room and saw Noah showing off a new watch to the relatives. I recognized it immediately, a limited edition that retails for about $1,200, the same model I had seen on a promotional email from my credit card. He caught my eye and shrugged as if to say, "There's still credit left, don't worry." When my father took the microphone, I expected a few words of gratitude. Thank you to my mother for preparing the meal. Or, thanks to everyone for coming. But no. He looked straight at me without blinking. Kinsley is no longer our daughter. From now on, you must fend for yourself. Don't come back to this house. I froze. The wine glass in my hand tilted. A few drops fell on my dress, but I didn't feel cold. The room was utterly silent. No one spoke. They looked at me as though I had done something monstrous. My mother bowed her head, pretending to dry dishes. Noah turned away, pretending to be on his phone. No one defended me. I set the glass down and turned to leave. There was no voice to stop me. No question. No care. And with the white snow falling on my thin coat, I felt less chilled by the cold than by the sense of being stripped of my place in my own family, not because of any mistake I had made, but simply because I refused to submit. On the drive home, I called no one. I went straight to my small apartment in an older complex in Brooklyn. Once I arrived, I sat still on the couch for hours, lights off, heater off. I stared into the dark, thinking about how a father could do such a thing in front of the whole family without meeting his daughter's eyes. How much had I sacrificed to keep that family afloat? How silently had I carried all those burdens so that others didn't see how heavy they were? And why, after all those efforts, did I receive only a denial wrapped in wine and holiday lights? I did not want to know. At that moment, I didn't want to know. One thing was clear. This was no longer a matter of feelings. It had become a calculation that needed to be recalculated. And I, who had buried myself in invisible arithmetic, would now have to start calculating for myself from zero. I do not remember clearly how I drove home after that night. I only recall the streets felt emptier than usual, the streetlights dimmed beneath a thin layer of snow, reflecting like the eyes of those who watched me at the party cold, indifferent. My hands clutched the steering wheel as if letting go would make everything fall apart. Back home, I didn't take off my shoes. I did not turn on the lights. I stood in the dark of the apartment I had carefully put together over years of saving, a worn armchair from a thrift store. A small dining table with 3 chairs, the 4th leg broken, but kept because I thought I would fix it someday. Everything there bore the marks of effort, pennies saved, overtime hours. Nothing fancy, but mine. Solely mine. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor, leaning my back against the kitchen cabinet, and listened to the ticking of the clock. My father's voice kept echoing, "Kinsley is no longer our daughter." Those words were not a roar of anger or a rebuke. They were flat, like a weather report, emotionless. As if I were an overdue renter who needed to move out. The only thing my mother said after his declaration was, "I have a doctor's appointment next week. You'll still handle the insurance, right?" I stared at her for a long time, looking at the hand she rested lightly on a glass, her finger tapping slowly as if nothing had happened. No reaction, no sad eyes, no question. She only cared about the appointment. I had once thought my mother was the only one in the house who understood me. When I first started my job in Manhattan, she sent a handwritten letter saying she was proud. But over time, she grew more silent. Silent when I transferred money to pay her medical bills without asking. Silent when my father snapped at me during dinner. Silent, even when Noah called me a walking ATM while joking with friends. I couldn't tell whether that silence was helplessness or complicity. But last night I understood. It was a choice. As for Noah, the brother I had held in the hospital corridor while our parents argued, he now offered a faint, triumphant smile. Not a big grin, but it sounded like a door slamming shut behind me. He looked at me as if I were a supporting character in the life he was starring in. The way he leaned back in his chair with a glass of champagne, which he certainly hadn't paid for, and the look of satisfaction on his face made me feel colder than the snow outside. I didn't take much when I left. Just my wallet, keys, and a coat. The knitted scarf my mother had made hung on the coat hook, not because I wanted to leave a memento, but because I didn't want to carry anything that would draw me back. The next morning, I sat by the window watching snow fall through the frosted glass. My mother's name lit up on my phone. I didn't answer. Then a text came through. "Last night was because your father was too tired. Don't take it to heart. But you'll still handle the insurance this month, right? The appointment is on Tuesday." No question of how I was. No apology. Just a confirmation that I would continue paying. I deleted the message. Not out of anger, but because it was unmistakably clear. They do not see me as family. I am a resource. A cash flow. A tool. Around 10 a.m. I dressed and stepped outside. The streets were still white, but people were shoveling and shops opening. I stopped at a small coffee shop near my old office. The owner, Mr. Martin, a widower whose hands always trembled, but who still insisted on pulling every latte by hand, looked at me with gentleness. "Kinsley, working through the holidays?" he asked. I smiled lightly. "Just needed to get out of the house for a bit so I don't lose my mind," he nodded. "Sometimes a bit of cold air is better than being in a room full of hot tempers." I stayed a long time, sipping coffee and opening my notebook. I began listing every expense I had covered for the family over the past year, not to demand repayment, but to see the whole picture. My mother's health insurance, $580 per month. Noah's fall tuition, $6,200. Payments on my father's credit card, $4,300. Monthly transfers for household living expenses, about $1,800. I had proof for every item. I'd kept these records because I was afraid my parents would forget, never thinking I would need them to protect myself. I stopped writing when the total crossed $30,000 over the past 14 months. I breathed in deep. It wasn't the money I mourned. It was a deeper ache. For them, even that amount was not enough. That afternoon, I went home, logged into my bank account, and began changing things. I canceled all automatic payments for the three of them. I closed the supplementary card for Noah. I set up fraud alerts. I changed the passwords on my main accounts. I sat for hours at the dining table with only a warm lamp and the clicking of the keyboard. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking care of myself. Then my phone rang again. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I had no reason left to listen. I turned the ringer off and kept typing. On my spreadsheet, I created a new line labeled Freedom Fund. A blank column waited for the first numbers, but at least it belonged to me. I don't usually keep paperwork at home. Everything financial is digitized and neatly stored on my personal drive. But that afternoon, when I decided to sort the old wooden filing drawer before severing all remaining ties, I opened a white envelope I hadn't touched in months. Inside were a stack of bank statements with the account holder's name, Richard McAllister, my father. I knew he had a separate account. What made my hands tremble, as I flipped the pages, were the numbers at the bottom of each month. While I had been working to send money for bills and insurance, this account showed steady deposits each month. $3,000, then $4,000, then $5,000 most recently. This account had existed for at least a year and a half. I pulled out each page and read every line. It wasn't just deposits, there were large expenditures I had never seen on any household bill. A transfer to a Colorado real estate company, a deposit receipt of nearly $8,000 for Silver Ridge cabin rental and sales. I froze. I remembered overhearing a phone call between my father and someone when he thought I was not home. I was standing in the kitchen, the dishwasher was running. He was speaking to someone named Mason. I'd caught a phrase, "If she keeps paying like this, I'll lock in the cabin before February." I had not listened further. I thought it was a conversation about someone else. Maybe I didn't want to understand. I spread the documents across the table as if to prove to myself I was not imagining it. I opened my laptop and checked my savings account balance. Less than $2,000 remained. Last month, I had nearly $10,000. Everything had been spent to prop up the house I thought was falling apart. I had never asked my parents about their finances out of respect. I believed my father had once been responsible, running a small business for 2 decades, and that perhaps misfortune or carelessness led to his downfall. But what lay on the table revealed a different man, one building a facade, while I was the dutiful daughter managing everything in the background, and he quietly saving for a vacation dream. I picked up my phone to call my mother. My finger hovered over the screen. I didn't know where to begin. Did she know, or was she part of the plan? A new message popped up. It was from Noah. "I need an extra $600 for an unexpected tuition fee. The school didn't notify us. It's urgent." I stared at the words, my chest hollow. No greeting. No check to see if I was okay after Christmas night. Just money. And the word urgent. I didn't reply. I opened Noah's tuition file that I had saved. The school had sent the end-of-term billing notice 2 weeks ago. There was no additional fee. He was lying. I propped my elbows on the table and buried my face in my hands. My father's voice echoed in my head, like a verdict. "Kinsley is no longer our daughter." Yet he was using my name to put a deposit on a cabin in another state, letting my brother call to beg for money. And my mother was texting only to ask about her health insurance. I stood up, went to the closet, and pulled out the suitcase of old financial records, an old habit I hadn't given up. I dug through each envelope and folder, comparing signatures and checking dates. I had proof of everything I'd paid for the family. I always kept records, thinking I might need them for tax purposes. I never imagined I would need them for this. I called Maya. Her voice was as gentle as ever. Kinsley, you okay? I didn't know where to begin. I only sighed. Maya, I just found out my father has a secret account. It looks like he used my name to put a deposit on a vacation cabin. Maya was quiet for a moment, then she exhaled slowly. Are you sure? I have bank statements, wire transfer receipts, a deposit invoice. It was sent from his email but used my information. It seems he quietly used my identity to get a faster loan approval. Oh my God, Maya murmured. You have to do something. Record everything. Change all your passwords. Lock any linked accounts. I can take you to my cousin. He works at a law firm that specializes in family financial matters. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. Thanks, I think I need that. We talked for a few more minutes. I hung up and sat motionless at my computer for a long time. When I opened the browser again, I typed into the search bar, legal advice, identity fraud, in financial records. I don't want to take everything to court, but if I do nothing, this will continue. I can't let my name be the signature on a cabin loan while they start a new life and leave me with the debts and consequences. I opened my inbox. There was a new email from the Colorado real estate company confirming third-party Kinsley McAllister has agreed to the deposit. Even without a handwritten signature, there was enough evidence to show my information had been used without authorization. I saved that email and all related documents into a folder I labeled Evidence. I didn't know where this would lead, but one thing was clear. I am no longer a source for others to drain and then walk away from. If someone planned to start a life off my back, I would stop them. Not with anger, but with clarity in the law. Maya's apartment is on the 6th floor of a complex near the hospital where she works. It's small, neat, and always smells faintly of mint from the candle she lights each night. She's lived alone for years, so when I texted asking if I could stay a few weeks, she replied with just 2 words, "Come over." I arrived with 3 suitcases and a backpack. Most of my things were still at my parents' place, but I'd taken the essentials, my laptop, documents, a few changes of clothes, my finance notebook, and a small box of personal items I didn't want to leave behind. I stood at her door for less than 5 seconds before Maya opened it. She was in pale green scrubs, hair tied back, a steaming cup of tea in her hand. "Come in." "It's freezing out," she said, pulling my suitcase inside. "I made peppermint tea, and there are ginger cookies." I sank onto the sofa and leaned back, warmth spread into my hands and chest, dissolving some of the ice left from that Christmas night. Maya sat down beside me and tilted her head. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft as if touching a sore place. "For now," I said. "But I think I need to start handling things and fast." She nodded. "My cousin Clay works at a law firm specializing in financial and property rights. Very discreet, very professional. I'll set up a meeting." I opened my laptop and pulled out the files I'd organized. Bank transfers, the cabin deposit confirmation, Noah's tuition invoices, and the credit card statements in my name that my father had used. Everything was chronological and tidy. I started working as if I were auditing, except this time the subject of the audit was my own family. Maya brought over 2 cups of tea and a plate of cookies, placing them on the table. "I know you're strong," she said, "but this is harder than any report you've worked through." I tightened my grip around the cup. I covered almost everything for them for over a year. I didn't even think to keep some of it. If I hadn't found those papers in the drawer, I'd probably still be sending money out of habit. She shook her head gently. "You don't deserve this. No one does." After messaging Clay to schedule a meeting, I took the next critical step, removing my family's access to my finances. I logged into my bank account and transferred the remaining balance into a new account I opened that morning at a nearby branch. Then I changed passwords, enabled 2-factor authentication, and deauthorized devices I didn't recognize. I canceled all recurring payments tied to my mother's health insurance, my brother's tuition, and the internet service at the old house that was in my name. Each time I clicked cancel, it felt like cutting a rope tied around my chest. Some were heavy and hard, some were numb, but every single one had to come undone. Maya came back into the room just as I was dealing with the supplementary card Noah had been using. "Do you need me to do anything?" I nodded. "Help me go through every bill I ever paid. I have both hard copies and digital files. If I file a complaint or a civil suit, I need everything rock solid." She sat beside me and opened her laptop. Together, we went line by line. Every suspicious charge we flagged. Every anomaly got a note. She didn't say much, but her presence was the firmest support I had. We worked for nearly 3 hours. When the clock read 11:30 p.m., Maya stretched. "My cousin set your meeting for 4 p.m. tomorrow in his Midtown office. I'll go with you if you want." I smiled, my eyes prickling from having not had anyone truly in my corner for so long. "Thanks, not because I can't do it alone, but because I don't want to do it alone today." That night, I slept in the spare room. Maya kept ready for guests. The blanket was warm, the essential oil scent calming, and no one pounded on the door demanding money or asking if I'd covered a doctor's bill. I left my laptop on the bedside table and the folders of documents neatly stacked. I wasn't afraid anymore. Things might be falling apart, but at least I was standing on solid ground. The next morning, Maya had left a note on the fridge. "There's a chicken sandwich in the fridge. Eat it, then head to Clay. Put everything you're carrying into the hands of someone who knows the law." I grabbed the sandwich, threw on my coat, and set out. That day, I stopped by the bank to print extra statements, and then to a print shop to make 2 organized copies of my files. One for the lawyer, one for my records. In the taxi on the way to Clay's office, I held the folder on my lap like a piece of myself that had been ripped away and was now being gathered. Clay's law firm is housed in a stately, quiet building with 18 floors. He's about 40, face serious but with listening eyes. When I explained the story and handed over the evidence, he didn't speak for nearly 10 minutes. He read, flipped pages, cross-referenced. Finally, he nodded. "Kinsley, everything you've kept is thorough. Legally, if your father used your personal information to conduct financial transactions without your consent, that's a civil violation and could amount to identity fraud." I looked at him. "So if I want to stop them using my name?" "You can file for an injunction to freeze any financial activity under your name related to them. I'll also help you file fraud alerts with the 3 major credit bureaus so they can't open new accounts in your name." I exhaled, relieved, not because the problem was solved, but because I wasn't standing alone in a storm anymore. Leaving the office, my legs felt lighter, and a clear thought formed. I'm not running away. I'm protecting myself with evidence, with the law, and with the resolve I built through years of silence. I was sitting in Maya's kitchen with a warm lamp and the kettle clicking when my phone buzzed in my sweater pocket. Snow drifted softly against the frosted window, the streetlights turning each flake into a small, cold star. I had just finished a call with Clay about the court filing to protect my financial rights. Things were aligning, even though inside I still felt heavy. Just as I was pouring tea, my phone vibrated again. The screen showed an unexpected name, Noah. I hesitated a moment before opening his message. "They're not just kicking you out, they're planning something worse." My palms went cold even though the kitchen was warm. Another message arrived right after, as if Noah feared losing courage before he finished typing. "Mom and Dad are trying to refinance the house, but they don't qualify. They plan to put your name on it to secure the loan. They've prepared the paperwork. It's nearly done." I stared at the words. My heart sped up, but anger didn't well up first. It felt like sitting in a smoke-filled room and suddenly realizing it's not a boiling pot, it's a slow-burning fire. I typed one word back: details. Noah took more than 10 minutes to answer. In that time, I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the mortgage statement from last year I had accidentally saved. It listed both my parents' names and explicitly stated that no secondary mortgage could be opened without co-owner signatures. Noah's reply was long enough that I had to scroll. "I heard them talking a few days ago, right after you moved out. Dad called a guy named Sam at a brokerage. They said if they list you as a co-owner, the loan will be easier because your credit is better. Mom has a copy of your ID and that old Social Security card you used to give her for insurance last year. They plan to file this week. They said if you find out, just say you've cut ties and can't interfere." I read each line slowly, afraid that skimming would cause me to miss something that might save me. A mix of chill and helplessness crawled up my fingers. I called Clay immediately. He answered almost at once, probably working late. I spoke fast, my voice taut. Clay, Noah just messaged me. My parents plan to take out a second mortgage on the house using my name. They have my ID. They might forge it. There was a pause, then his voice came steady and firm. We need to move now. I'll prepare an emergency petition to protect your identity and assets. Also, notify the 3 credit bureaus to freeze your report. No one can open a new loan against you if the file is frozen. I thanked him and hung up, clutching the phone. Maya walked in, carrying a small bag of ointment and bandages she had just come off shift. What's going on? She asked, setting the bag down. I showed her Noah's messages and relayed Clay's instructions. Maya frowned, but then sat down beside me. Do you believe Noah? She asked. I do. He wouldn't risk it. He still lives with them, I said. If he's scared enough to text me, it's real. Maya nodded. Good. At least you have someone inside. That's important. I opened the websites for Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and followed the steps to place a 6-month freeze on my credit reports. I filed fraud alerts about potential misuse of my information. Every time I completed a form, I felt another lock click into place. I didn't want to be liable for debt I never authorized. An hour later, I messaged Noah, "Can you get the broker's name or company?" Within 5 minutes, he sent a screenshot of a note on his phone. Sam T. Victory Lending, 646XXXXX. Meet at 325 East 49th Street. Appointment Thursday this week, 10:30 a.m. I screenshotted Noah's note and forwarded it to Clay. About half an hour later, he called back. Thanks for the information. My office will file a petition asking the court to issue an emergency injunction to halt any lending activity related to you within the next 14 days. I'll have a colleague send an official notice to Victory Lending before they finalize anything. I nodded, though Clay couldn't see me. What if they forged my signature? We can request a criminal investigation. But the important thing is you reported this early. If you wait, everything gets a lot harder. I leaned back in the chair. My head wasn't filled with anger anymore. It felt like a wide field burned to the ground, with the foundations slowly being exposed, the parts I now needed to clear away. Maya poured tea for me, then sat down quietly. Have you thought about talking to them face to face? She asked softly. I looked at the steam rising from my cup. I thought about it. But the deeper I dig, the more I realize words won't stop someone who's already decided to use another person as a tool. Only the law can set limits. Maya said nothing more. She just took my wrist and squeezed gently. Warm, clear, not loud. And there, in that small kitchen smelling of cinnamon and mint, I had enough reason to move forward even if what lay behind me was breaking apart beyond recognition. I arranged to see Clay again on Friday morning, on a freezing, gray day, as if the whole sky were quietly echoing what was happening down below. I brought 2 thick binders, clearly color-coded. Blue for financial transaction documents, red for personal expenses I had paid for the family this year, and gray for all the messages, emails, and screenshots I had quietly collected over the past 3 weeks. Clay met me in the lobby. His eyes brightened when he saw me, though his face kept the serious expression of someone handling a case that could lead to civil litigation. The office was quieter than usual, with only keyboard clicks and the distant hum of a printer. He led me into a small conference room with soft light and a long wooden table that felt private without being claustrophobic. I spread the files in front of him, flipping through the pages as I spoke and pointed. Clay did not interrupt. He took notes, nodded, and asked a few small clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat up straight and pulled a copy of a loan agreement from Horizon Bank, a small bank where I had once linked a card in 2021 from his own documents. I need you to confirm this, he said, pushing the contract toward me. Did you ever sign for a $15,000 personal loan that was submitted last April? I looked down at the signature on the final page. My heart tightened. The signature looked a lot like mine, a soft curve, the way the capital K slants slightly to the left, the underscored flourish that nearly matched. But I had never signed a loan with Horizon Bank. I raised my head, forcing myself to stay calm. I never completed that loan application. I never received any disbursement from that bank. Clay nodded. I suspected as much. The reason I asked is that this loan is still active and currently marked as payment freeze pending because the borrower requested an extension due to a family emergency. What's notable is the disbursement wasn't deposited into any of your known personal accounts. It went to a subsidiary account opened under KM Solutions, a company name tied to the household. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and skimmed through my personal accounts. There was no such account. I also opened the credit report I had pulled from Experian 2 days earlier. Under accounts opened in the last 24 months, it listed Horizon Bank personal loan, $15,000 opened the 12th of April 2022. I inhaled. A chill ran from my wrist up my shoulder. They forged my signature, I said, my voice dry, and they set up a shell company to receive the funds. Clay leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. If that can be verified, it's more than a forged signature. This could amount to organized financial fraud. Depending on who filed the application and who assisted them, we can widen the scope of the investigation. I rested back in the chair, still clutching the gray binder. Can you help me bring this to court? Yes, but I want you to be prepared. This will not be quick. Your family will react. They may try to erase evidence or deny the allegations. If we act fast and carefully, they won't have time to cover their tracks. I looked him straight in the eye. They took everything from me. I won't let them take my name too. Clay gave a small smile, not of pleasure, but of respect for my clarity and resolve. Then, starting today, we'll file a civil suit. I'll also petition the court for temporary freezes on any financial transactions involving your name and the individuals named in the filings. I'll contact Horizon directly to verify the signature and trace the receiving account. On the steps outside the law office, I paused at the building's entrance. The rain had stopped. A thin, cold dampness lingered in the air that made everything feel strangely crisp. I stood there a moment and took a deep breath, looking at the stone walkway below. How long had it been since I walked forward without feeling tugged backward by things left unsaid? When I returned to Maya's apartment, she had 2 steaming plates of pasta and a light bottle of red wine waiting on the table. She looked up and smiled without asking. "Any results?" she asked, pulling a chair out for me. I sat down and set the file bag beside me. "Yes, and I might have to go to court." Maya didn't overreact. She simply nodded, filled 2 glasses carefully, and handed one to me. "Then we'll prepare, step by step." I clinked my glass against hers. A small, quiet tide rose in my chest, not joy and not fury, but a strange reassurance that I wouldn't back down. I would see it through, not out of vengeance, but because no one should live forever in the shadow of deceit. I was sitting on the living room floor at Maya's, back against the sofa, tea in one hand and the documents Clay had emailed me in the other. Maya had just come off shift. Water was still running faintly in the bathroom. The apartment was unusually still, lit by a soft lamp over the pile of files. I was reviewing my witness list when a sudden heavy knocking sounded at the door. It wasn't the muffled knock of someone dropping off a package. It was angry pounding, hard enough to rattle the old wooden door. I jumped to my feet. Before I could reach it, a voice pierced through. "Kinsley, open up, you can't hide forever." That voice, low, hoarse, with a tremor of menace, I recognized it immediately. My father. I went to the peephole but didn't open. He stood in the hallway in his heavy coat, breath steaming in the cold air. His face was flushed, whether from cold or fury I couldn't tell. He held a wad of crumpled papers and wore an anger I had never seen so plainly before. "I raised you for 20-some years. I paid for your school, bought your books. Do you think you suddenly deserve that degree for nothing? Now you turn your back, betray us, sue your parents to save face? Open the door now." I didn't answer. I stepped back and quietly dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was steady and clear. I gave the address, described the person causing the disturbance, and told them he had made threats and was known to have forged signatures. I spoke quickly, precisely, no wasted words. Outside, he kept pounding, each blow heavy enough to try to break the lock. "You're not my daughter anymore, are you? Then give back everything I paid for. The car you drive, the computer, the money you used to sue me. It's all mine." Maya came out of the bathroom, hair still damp, eyes wide. I motioned for her to step back. She understood and pulled out her phone to call building management. I kept the line to the dispatcher open and updated the situation. Footsteps echoed on the stairwell. An older man from the apartment across the hall opened his door and watched for a moment before slamming it shut. The young neighbor I had only briefly met earlier poked her head out with her phone shaking in her hand. "I already called the police," she told Maya, in a small but clear voice. My father shouted, "Mind your business! This is a family matter." He kicked the door hard. The wood shuddered and the lock loosened. "Kinsley, if you don't come out, I'll—" The elevator dinged and heavy footsteps approached. Two building security guards appeared first, followed by two uniformed officers. One officer immediately raised a hand and ordered him to stop. "Sir, step away from the door, put your hands up." My father spun as if waking from a trance, then shouted, "She's my daughter, she betrayed me. I only came to talk." "You're disturbing the peace and intimidating a resident," the officer said firmly. "We received a complaint. You're required to leave the premises." "She owes me money," my father barked. "Number, you're breaking the law." They didn't argue further. His hands were cuffed behind his back, his scarf still hung around his neck, but his eyes were red and wild. As they led him away, I stayed behind the door, refusing to open. I didn't need to look at him. 15 minutes later, I went downstairs to give a statement with one of the officers. Maya came with me. We sat in a small room by the front desk, where photos of residents and notices were pinned to the wall. The older desk clerk looked at me with a sympathetic expression. I smiled in return. "Do you want to file for a restraining order?" the officer asked after I finished signing the last page. "Yes," I replied, steady. "I don't feel safe." He nodded and handed me the form, explaining the process. I filled in every field, recalling details as I went. When I finished, I handed it back. "If you need anything else, just call," he said, eyes full of understanding. "They no longer have the right to cross this boundary." I gave a small nod. On the walk back, Maya wrapped her arm through mine tightly. "I'm sorry your father did that in my building," she said. "You don't need to apologize," I said, looking ahead. "They can't humiliate me anymore once they've lost control." I didn't cry. It wasn't the pain people expected. Seeing your father handcuffed in front of the whole building wasn't satisfying or triumphant. It was the truth laid bare. Something had been wrong for years, and it could no longer be hidden. Back at the apartment, I poured a glass of water. I opened my laptop and checked the local court portal. My restraining order filing was already logged, with a case number, the time filed, and the investigator assigned. I saved the page and printed a copy to place beside my financial documents. The apartment smelled of mint, the soft lamp still glowed, and wind rattled the frosted window. Inside me, however, something had changed. I no longer feared the knock at the door. I had learned to keep it shut for myself. That afternoon I sat on Maya's small balcony, the late sun filtering through thin curtains in a warm, quiet glow. A winter breeze brushed my cheek and carried the scent of wood burning from a neighbor's fireplace. I had just completed the restraining order process and felt the weight loosen in my chest. What I didn't expect was the next blow, not angry, but a hollow disappointment. A message from Noah arrived just before 6 p.m. "Do you still have the receipts for your laptop and camera? Mom took them to pawn." I felt a momentary confusion, then a sinking drop in my stomach. I rushed inside to the storage closet and opened the secondary suitcase I had used for my camera, laptop, and external drive. It was in its usual place, but when I unzipped it, it was empty. I still remember packing that suitcase at my old place. I had tucked the camera and laptop carefully between 2 layers of clothes and wrapped them in a fluffy towel. When I moved into Maya's apartment, things were so chaotic I only opened the main suitcase to grab paperwork. The smaller suitcase remained zipped. I didn't check it. I didn't have to speculate for long. I called Clay right away. "Clay, my laptop and camera are gone. My brother just told me our mother took them somewhere, most likely pawned them." He asked calmly, immediately. "Do you have the purchase receipts and the serial numbers?" "I have them all, photos from recent projects and the store confirmation emails too." "Then call the police right away. I'll prepare the legal paperwork and include a request to open a criminal investigation." I hung up and called the local emergency number, giving them the full situation, the device serial numbers, and the last known location where the items had been seen. In less than 2 hours, I was at the nearest police station to file a stolen property report. The officer who took my statement was a woman named Clark, in her 40s, with a steady, calm voice. She flipped through the documents I handed her, carefully studying the receipts, the photos of the devices, and the usage logs by date. "Are you certain the items were taken while they were still at your parents' house?" she asked. I nodded. I left right after Christmas night with the suitcase fully packed. I didn't check it again when I arrived at Maya's. A few days later, I moved apartments, and this morning my brother confirmed our mother had secretly taken them. Officer Clark made careful notes, then called a unit to check pawn shops in the area. I waited nearly an hour. My stomach was tight, but I wasn't panicking. The dominant feeling was disbelief. Not because my mother had taken my things, I had nearly accepted that was possible, but because she had gone so far as to sell the only tools I used to support my work and independence. A laptop worth more than $2,000 and a camera approaching $1,500. These weren't small items or easy to replace. A younger officer walked in and handed Officer Clark a printed page. She scanned it, then turned to me. A Canon EOS camera and a 13-inch MacBook Pro were submitted to Parkway Pawn in the northern area on Monday. The serial numbers matched the records you provided. I sat up straight. Who brought them in? We're pulling the security camera footage now. According to the shop owner, the person who pawned them was a woman in her 50s who said they were family property temporarily used to pay the electric bill. She paused. We'll proceed to recover the items and open a criminal investigation for theft of property with verified ownership. I signed the report, confirmed ownership, and left the station with a copy of the complaint in my hand. It was completely dark outside, and the streets were wet with rain. I walked slowly toward the subway, feeling each step as if the cobblestones themselves were urging me to be more careful than ever. Back at Maya's, I handed her all the paperwork. She sat quietly for a moment as she read the part describing who had pawned the items. "Your mother really didn't think about the consequences?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I poured 2 cups of tea, placed one in front of her, and then said, "I think she no longer sees me as a daughter. I'm something that can be converted into monetary value, like a check or an electronic device." Maya looked at me for a long moment, then exhaled. "The way you've stayed composed makes me so impressed." I smiled and rested my head against the back of the chair. Maybe because everything has passed the point of emotion. Now it's just action. She didn't add anything else, but I could feel her firmly on my side, someone who wouldn't give up halfway. The next day, I got a call from Officer Clark. "We've verified the security footage. The person who brought the devices in is Helen McAllister. We matched the images with ID and have an official report. Your items will be returned to you within 48 hours. The case will be passed on to the investigative unit for further processing." I thanked her and set the phone down. My chest felt hollow the way it had when I first left the house I used to call home. But in that hollow, something was beginning to grow, not hope pinned on others, but trust in myself. What I was doing was no longer just about vindication. It was about setting boundaries clearly, firmly, and in a way that could not be violated again. A message from my Aunt Linda arrived one Monday morning while I was finishing the last sip of coffee before heading to the lawyer's office. She wrote simply, "Kinsley, I just heard from Mrs. Perkins. If you need to talk, call me anytime." I looked at the screen and took a few seconds to picture her. The gentle woman who always brought cookies at Thanksgiving. The only person who showed up to congratulate me when I got my MBA because my parents claimed they were too busy. Before I could reply, another message came in from Uncle George, my mother's brother. "Kinsley, can you send me copies of any documents proving what's going on? People are talking, but everyone is hearing only one side." I didn't feel happy to receive those messages, and I wasn't relieved. But I sensed the moment had come, not to vent, but to bring everything into the light. I sorted and sent documents, a detailed summary of the money I'd covered for the family over 2 years, a copy of the loan issued in my name that I never signed, the pawn shop recovery report, and the restraining order filing against my father. I also included recordings I had kept, including my father shouting in the Terry apartment hallway and the text messages from Noah warning me. A few hours later, my Aunt Linda called. She was crying. "I can't believe it. Did they really do this to you? And Helen? And Richard?" I was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Auntie, I don't need them to apologize. I just need them to stop." That same day, another neighbor, Mr. Garcia, who lived across from my parents, phoned Clay's office to provide his doorbell camera footage. It showed my mother leaving the house carrying a large handbag at 6 a.m. on the day my items were pawned. The video was clear, date, time, face, even the old chestnut leather bag I had bought her for her birthday. News spread quickly through the family. No one remained silent. People who used to shake their heads when my father labeled me ungrateful were now asking questions of him and of themselves. 3 days later, Clay told me the bank had officially declined the second mortgage my parents were attempting to open because they discovered a legal dispute involving identity on the co-ownership documents. Less than 2 weeks after that, I received notice that the suburban house where I grew up, the place I once thought would be a refuge, had been foreclosed and sealed by the bank. I didn't feel joyous or triumphant, just lighter. That house, once a symbol of stability to the neighbors, had been the place where I was called a parasite at the Christmas party. Now that supposed stability was just peeling paint, revealing rotten foundations underneath. That evening, as I was folding my financial files for an upcoming court date, my phone rang. It was Noah. I didn't answer immediately. I studied his name on the screen for a long moment. The image of him at the party, smirking when my father announced I was disowned, still lingered. Then I picked up. His voice wasn't loud or apologetic, just exhausted. "Do you have a minute?" "Go ahead," I said. There was a short silence. Then Noah sighed. "I was wrong. I didn't think things would get this bad. They forced me to take their side. I still live under their roof. If I say the wrong thing, Mom will cut off my tuition assistance. Dad threatened to take me out of the will." I didn't interrupt. I let him continue. "But after you left, everything fell apart. They started blaming each other. Mom screamed. Dad smashed picture frames. Then the money ran out. They had no one to lean on. I realized I was just a backup pawn if you weren't there." His voice broke at the end. I heard him swallow. "I copied documents from Dad's computer and sent them to your lawyer. When they went to meet the broker, I went into his study. There's more than I thought. Even a joint account they set up in your name, but using an email account Mom still accesses." I closed my eyes. "Thank you for telling the truth." Noah was quiet, then in a lower voice. "Do you think I have a way out?" I tore my gaze away from the window and spoke steadily. "You're young, you don't have to be them. If you want to get out, I'll help." I heard him take a breath and ask softly, "How?" "I know people who place students in part-time roles at training centers. If you want, I'll forward your resume. As for the rest of your tuition, I won't pay it, but I can help you reapply for financial aid. It might not cover everything, but it will help you stand on your own." Noah was silent for a long time. This time I didn't push him. I wanted him to choose. He wasn't the kid who used to ride in the back of my car. He wasn't the spoiled shadow anymore. Finally, he said slowly, "I'll try." I didn't smile or congratulate him. I just looked at the empty chair across from me, the place that had been reserved for him for years. Maybe someone else would sit there now. But at least it wouldn't be the place of someone hidden in silence. And I no longer a daughter under. That roof remained ready to point the way when someone stepped out of a darkness they'd been forced into for far too long. A year passed in the blink of an eye, though for me, each month and week was a slice of recovery. Not recovery from an illness or accident, but the gradual mending of a soul broken by those who should have protected me. I no longer lived in Maya's old apartment, though she was still on the same floor. We found a quieter building uptown where the maple-lined street turns golden in autumn. My apartment is small but warm. I chose every lamp and picture myself. Nothing in it came from my parents' house. Every item is a new beginning, a declaration that I am moving forward, not as a victim, but as a woman who chooses peace. I work full-time at a nonprofit that provides financial and legal support to people who have been exploited by their families. The work is not easy, but it matters. I now help young women whose parents used their names to take loans, or whose siblings pressured them to sign away property rights. Many of them are too young to understand they have a right to say no. When I meet them, I see my 24-year-old self, fresh out of school, bewildered, trying to be strong in front of the people I trusted. Noah is finishing his final semester at community college. He works part-time at a coding skills center and earns enough to cover his tuition and living expenses. We meet for lunch on weekends, talk, and help each other maintain the boundaries we're learning to set, though sometimes the ghosts of the past still knock at the door. Maya was the same as ever, calm and thoughtful. She reminded me about the small but meaningful things. How long to burn a scented candle so the room doesn't get stuffy. Where to put a lavender plant in the kitchen so it's easy to care for. and how to keep the fridge from smelling like fish even when everything's wrapped. She didn't talk much about the nights I couldn't sleep, or the times I cried in the bathroom. But whenever I woke from a nightmare in the middle of the night, Maya was always waiting in the hallway with a warm glass of water and a look that asked nothing. This Thanksgiving, I stood in my own kitchen, tossing a vegetable salad, while Maya fussed over the roast chicken and Noah arranged flowers at the table. A few friends from the support group I help with were there too. They brought apple pie, wine, and stories about hard days that were, thankfully, behind them. When everyone sat down, I looked around. No one at the table was blood-related. Yet the eyes, the laughter, the gentle hand touches while refilling glasses made me feel like I belonged. A family that didn't need shared blood, only shared values. Dinner ended with a silly guessing game. Everyone doubled over, laughing at Noah's pantomime of George Washington as a cowboy on a horse. I leaned back a little, watching the room glow under warm lights and fill with laughter, feeling as if I had shed an old suit of armor. Then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. I almost didn't pick up, but something nudged me to press accept. Kinsley? The voice on the other end was weak and shaky, but I recognized it immediately. It was my mother. I stepped out onto the balcony. The November night air was cold enough that I hugged the phone tight in my hand. "We have nothing left," she whispered. "The house has been sold. The car's gone. Your father just lies around all day and doesn't speak. People are avoiding us. Could you come see me?" I leaned my back against the wall. I felt neither anger nor pity, just a hollow, standing between two worlds not part of the old one, and not yet ready to forgive. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low but clear. "I don't dare ask for anything. I just want to see you. To see you, if you'll allow it." I looked through the glass at the dining room, still lively inside. Maya was pouring more wine. Noah had his head bent, telling a joke that made the person next to him laugh. A friend looked up, saw me, and gave a small wave. I turned away. "Do you think things could ever be like they were?" I asked, not because I believed it, but because I wanted to hear her say it. There was a long silence. Then my mother spoke in a voice nearly gone. I don't think things can go back to how they were. If anything comes back, it won't be the same. It would have to be something different, if you allow it." I didn't answer. After we hung up, I stood on the balcony for a few more minutes. The cold wind pressed into my collar and made me shiver, but I didn't go inside. The question looped through my head all night. If they were truly remorseful, could I forgive them? Or must I hold firm to protect what I spent so long rebuilding? Part of me wanted to go, even if only to close the chapter properly. But another part worried that if I opened that door, I might lose the peace I had fought so hard to achieve. I don't have an answer yet. Maybe there won't be one right away. But at least I'm no longer the girl standing on the porch waiting for someone else to give her a place. Now I choose who may cross the threshold into my world, a world of kindness, honesty, and fullness found in the small things. I sat back down at the table among people who chose to remain in my life out of sincerity, not obligation. In that moment, I realized some questions don't need immediate answers. Maybe forgiveness isn't a door that returns everything to how it was. Maybe it's a path that frees me from being tethered to the past. Or perhaps holding firm to boundaries is the truest way to love myself, to protect the peace I rebuilt through pain and tears. What do you think? If it were you, would you open your heart when parents who hurt you deeply want back in? Or would you move forward, calm but resolute? Share your thoughts below. I believe everyone has a story to tell and a decision to make in the work of protecting their heart. If you see yourself in this story, even for a moment of unsteadiness, a slice of memory, or a healed scar, stay with me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following stories about family, choices, and the crossroads no one teaches us how to navigate. Sometimes what we need most is someone who listens and understands that being true to yourself is its own kind of courage.